shorty, what your name is? Do you have a man who you came with?
Hello, audience, people everywhere. We are here for another episode of the Street Academy podcast, where we keep 1 foot in the academy and 1 foot in them streets.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you see today there are two co-hosts, Amber, Camila, and
Jacquie.
hello, and we are here for a mini-sode, and we have one important topic. It is something that stopped the world in its tracks. Still has a chokehold on Black women and many Black women everywhere.
Yep.
Playing it nonstop is none other than the Queen Bee's Renaissance album.
Yes.
We want to talk about a very specific, controversial, almost blasphemous, yet very, provocative song. What is the song, Jacquie?
Church Girl. I didn't know it was provocative.
Is it provocative? It's not provocative.
Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just not in the right provocation circles.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about it. We thought that the song Church Girl was so important. We have our own thoughts that we have not shared with each other yet. So I look forward to hearing. You're going to get fresh reactions, folks, of what we really think about this song, and what our actual opinions are. I think it warrants such an analysis and such a conversation. And we just wanted to put it in a mini-sode so that you can digest it and share it with others. We want this content out there. We would love to hear from you about what you think about it. So let's get right into it.
Let's.
Church Girl. Woo!
Now, see, Amber, I know you love this song. And
I
so
do.
it wasn't until you were like, your passion exuded so much that I was like, all right, let me take a second and listen to it with like this like dripping of Amber passion on me and see how I feel about it after. It has grown on me. Like once I took like that deep dive into it, like I really like it now.
That was the same with me. Let's first start with, what was your initial reaction to the song? Like just the first time through.
Yeah, I don't think I had like a strong reaction, which is interesting. Like I feel like there's like the Beyonce haters, like she can't do anything right. And then there's the Beyonce, like the Beehive, right? And you're not really in the middle. I feel like I'm one of those people who's in the middle, like, oh yeah, this is cool, but I'm not going to go super hard and I'm not going to be like, oh, this is horrible. So the first time I listened to it, I actually listened to the whole album together. So Church Girl didn't really stand out to me. I don't think any song really stood out to me initially, and part of that is because, like, the transitions between so many of the songs, it just feels like one long song. So I don't even know if I recognize what song was what when I first listened to it. But upon listening to Church Girl, I was just like, it's cute. It's cute.
So I had the similar feeling of just going through the whole album at first, thinking like, okay, what does stand out? And then I had to listen to it again to really feel it. When I got to Church Girl, though, it did stop me in my tracks. It came right from Break Your Soul. And it stopped me because I know the reference. I know the sample very, very, very well.
What
It's
is
a
it?
sample from Center of Thy Will by the Clark Sisters.
Okay.
I grew up listening to the Clark Sisters, love the Clark Sisters.
Yeah.
Center of Thy Will has been a song that I have sang since I was a child. And so to hear even that reference at first, like as soon as it came out, I'm like, what is she about to do with this? Even though many of our audience might not know that I am post-Adventist, also post-Christian. So I don't identify with the I don't connect to the theology of the song, yet I still very much appreciate the memories that I have attached to that song. And I still very much appreciate gospel music. I love gospel music. I still listen to gospel music. And so even in my evolution, my spiritual evolution, gospel music is still something I listen to, including Center of Thy Will, because there are so many good feelings associated with the songs, although there are some complex feelings as well because of the theology. Yet when I heard it, I didn't even realize how sacred in a way that song was to me because of my association with it. So it's one of the Clark Sisters' slower songs. I feel like it's a very, I feel like you have like Clark Sister songs that are like very like, let's dance, let's go, like that. You have more of the songs kind of like Jesus is a love song, or
Yes.
that was kind of like that. Like it's
Mhm.
one of those. It's not a ballad. It's just like Clark's sister's slow, like important
It's
music.
like the gospel-y R&B, like the real
Yeah.
slow.
Oh,
Yeah.
but it's. I wouldn't even say this one was R&B. It's just like it just feels like one of those heavier songs. Like it's one of
Mhm.
those more like kind of sacred songs. So when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, what is Beyonce doing?
Mhm.
And I love Beyonce, and I have more
Mhm.
recently accepted that I'm very much a member of the Beehive. And
Mhm.
so I got nervous because because I've had a lot of transitions with my love for Beyonce, because
Mm.
I like growing up, Destiny's Child was everything. And then I
Uh-huh.
feel like there was a phase where I became very more like deeply Christian. So I was not trying to listen to secular music and Beyonce, all the stuff about Beyonce being a part of Illuminati and stuff. I think I began to believe that. And I began to be like,
Mm.
oh, she has all this symbolism that is there. And but coming from a Christian perspective, if any symbolism that seems like occultish or anything like that could would just be looked at as like versus really trying to seek understanding for what it means. And so
Right.
I went through a phase of being like, oh no, I can't listen to Beyonce, although I would
Mhm.
always secretly listen to it.
I mean, I feel like that is like one of the quintessential messages of this song, though,
Of
of like
what?
this tension between what you're
Exactly.
doing
Exactly.
versus what you want to do.
Exactly. That's why in the first 20 seconds, I'm like, what? Because it's like that church girl in me, even though I bypassed that, right? It's like that church girl in me is like, whoa, what's happening? Like it's the alarms, it's the alarms of yesteryear start,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
But then it's like this, there's also this new liberated version of myself that's like, let me be open to what's about to happen. And
mhm.
so I'm like, I'm already seeing that very stark contrast in the first few seconds of the song. And I'm like, what is about to happen? And then the beat drops and it's like,
Yes.
what is happening?
Yes, that beat came in. I wasn't ready for that.
It felt to me at first, it just felt all over the place. And it felt like, I don't know what she's doing right now. It made me feel like, why did she choose this song? And I was definitely like conflicted at first because I'm like, there are these two aspects of myself that are listening to this song at
Mhm,
once. You know, there's like somewhat of an evolved self or a new self or a present self, but then there's this also younger self that
mhm,
knows this music in this particular context. And then there's also, is there a third person? I don't know.
mhm,
It is like that complete tension. And so that just impacted my first listen. But then I
mhm,
was like, this is because it struck me so much emotionally, I had to like go back in and listen to it again to try to
mhm,
understand like why would she choose the things that she chose, and also the different pieces to see how they began to connect together. And
mhm.
so once I started listening to the lyrics more and started like listening to the flow of it, I
Well, can I ask you a question before we get into like the details? Because I'm kind of
yeah.
curious about just like, your connection to the song. Do you
Mhm.
feel like this song is like a bridge between like two aspects of yourself then?
It might be. I'm so
Mm,
glad you said it in that way because I can never like excavate the Christian experience
mhm.
and excavate the Adventist experience. It is a part of me,
Yeah.
period. Like it is. And
Mhm,
so that's my foundation. That was my initial worldview and understanding of the world. So no matter what, there's still like so much of my worldview and my framing from that context. And then
mhm,
now there's this other part of me that's just like, I feel I just I have different views about things, more liberated, definitely. Like I would consider this a sex positive song, which growing up
mm,
in church is absolutely not sex positive. uh,
right.
it's definitely it's a dance positive song.
For sure.
It's all of those things. And so it is a complete, I don't want to call it a war, but it is an acknowledgement of worlds that exist, and it's an invitation to freedom.
Yeah, it is.
And that's why it coming after Break Your Soul, I think is so crucial. And
Oh, it
it
does.
Yeah, it comes right after that. And so, and it's such a contrast. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. So even if you look at like the first 5 songs of the album, I can't even know
Mm-hmm.
if it's 5 or 6, but you have the first ones, it's dance, it's dance.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
the first track that is still a dance, but the way she did it, it's a different pace though,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, when I look at the song, well, going back to the idea of like this being my own personal experience and it being reflective of that, I had to really sit with it because it was exactly what you said. And I'm glad that
Mm.
you said it in that way. Um, because it was like, I know this experience that she's talking about. And
Yeah.
I understand what she's trying to do. That's why the last lyric where she says, I'm not trying to hurt nobody, I'm just trying to bring freedom into your body. I'm like, that is so crucial because she knows that church girl experience and that war that happens within the church girl. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as I hopefully not as long as I live, but I have to do so much unlearning and relearning. Um,
Right.
and to me, that's what this song represents. It's like she puts it in your face. She juxtaposes this Clark sister. She uses like one of the most dynamic gospel groups, period,
Mm-hmm.
a legendary group. And then she juxtaposes it with straight dance, booty shaking, twerking music. And it's like, you have to pay
But
attention.
it's not even just the music. Like there are instructions. Like
There are
shake it like a sadi.
yes,
You know.
it's true, very explicitly. So let's get into the lyrics. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much I can say about this song. Okay, before we get into the lyrics, I want to say one more thing about Center of Thy Will and why I feel in particular why I think this is such a masterpiece and why I feel like that song was even chosen. So, and because I was like, why would she choose the sample that she chose in Center of That Will? So even that, I'm like, she could have chosen so many parts of the song, but she chose this one part. And when I think about Center of Thy Will, let me just pull up the lyrics. The thing that's interesting about Center of Thy Will is its theological stance, which
Mm.
is the idea that one can know it, one is desiring to be in the center of God's will,
Mm.
which means that the will of God can be known,
Mm.
right? And so if the will of God can be known, then that means I need to know how to know it. And then I want to know how to live in that. And I actually think that's one of the almost most destructive expectations within Christianity. It is that like mandate to be perfectly in alignment with God's plan for your life.
Yeah.
And people's pursuit of that will leave people paralyzed or like emotionally and spiritually distraught, which I know it has done that for me. It will leave people very confused. And it can also lead to all kinds of other erratic behaviors because you think that you're in the will or like in some kind of way you process like this is the will of God. It can become a neurosis. It can become a psychosis too, to like try to pursue the perfect will of God because it's like, well, what does God want for my life? Or like, and then you're reading scriptures, you're studying and stuff. But I think as we experience this life together, we all know, even the Bible says, like the rain falls on the just and the unjust. It's like, well, where
Right.
is this coming from? Like, what does it mean to, live a good life? And I don't want any calamity to befall me. So I'm trying to like live in this perfect will, but life comes in so many ways. And trying to live that perfect life means that you won't have a perfect life at all because you're trying to struggle, because life is about mistake making. It's about iteration. It's an iterative process,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's a learning process. So to me, that song is about the will of God, which is like completely unknown in a sense. And what is it? So then what does it mean to accept that you can't necessarily know the will? And then if you can't know the will, what do you do next? Get free. Or you trust that like I just have to live. I have to live life because that perfect will, the center of that perfect will, it's elusive and it's largely dependent on your context and your zip code and the traditions that are within your particular denomination of Christianity. It's not the same everywhere. It's not a consistent will. And so
Mhm.
for her to use that as the center of the song, I'm
Mhm.
like, where she's talking about church girls getting free. So it's like the idea of being free from the quote unquote perfect will of God, when it's like you're getting free from this elusive notion that you this notion that you have to live a perfect life, and also this like this very uh this it becomes such a place of judgment and shame and guilt when you fall short of that perfect will.
Mhm. I didn't even, I don't know the song center of thy will, your
Center of
will,
that will.
thy will. I don't know the song, and I'm like, I know all the songs. Like, how do I not know this one? Um, but as you were like talking and describing it, I didn't even take it like that. Like when I think of like, like the main sort of like the motivating like ethos of Christianity, and perhaps like multiple religions, but certainly Christianity, it's like this pursuit of like spiritual freedom.
Mhm.
And I thought that that was like a parallel in the song, just in terms of like Beyonce through her lyrics are like, I'm trying to free you, free your body. I
Mhm.
just kind of assumed that there was a parallel of like being in the center of thy will that kind of has a connotation of like this perfect sort of freedom.
Mm.
And so Beyonce is also trying to like instruct people into a particular type of freedom as well within the song.
Oh, I see. If you look at it like the center of thy will being thy own will, not somebody else's will.
Mm-mm. Like if like speaking like from a real like theological paradigm,
Mm-hmm.
if Christianity, this is like a geometric proof, right? Like if A equals B, then B equals C, then A equals C. But
Uh-huh.
like if Christianity is all about seeking freedom, and that freedom comes specifically through following God's will. If you're in the center of that freedom, in the center of that will, then you are perfectly free. Like your desires and all of those things align so perfectly with God that even your choices in terms of like, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to do this, I want to go do that, like you're free to make those choices, but those choices also align exactly with God's will.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm thinking in the same way that like, let's say that you have um like a partner, like a boo, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not my story. Y'all know this already. Me and my boo are very opposite. Like if he says let's go up, I'm like let's go down. If he's like let's go right, I'm like let's go left. But there are some people who, they are like perfectly in line with everything, right? And it makes me think of, if you're like, oh, we should paint the house blue. And they're like, I was thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I think of when I think of like this connection of like freedom and being in like the center of the will of like, yeah, you're making these choices, these decisions, but they're also perfectly in line with another being's like choices or like
Mm-hmm.
ideas or however I think I'm blanking on like the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's kind of how I thought about it.
That's such a different perspective. And
Mhm.
I can understand why that's also how you look at that. I think
Mhm.
what why I went to my interpretation was because prior to one of the things that kind of influenced my evolution out was
Mhm.
me trying to seek this perfect will. And I remember people,
Mhm.
pastors even saying like there's the perfect will of God and then there's the permissive will of God. And so it's just
Mhm.
like you're trying to get into that perfect will. And at the
Mhm.
same time, that the idea of freedom is if you do the things that you feel most called to do, that
Mhm.
will be God's will for your life because
Mhm.
that's the message, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think though where I struggled was the church has a definition for what the perfect will of God looks like.
Mhm.
So it just becomes so subject to interpretation. And so then what is like how does one like live out the perfect will within the Christian institution or within the
Mhm.
Adventist institution
Mhm.
because of how it's determined. It doesn't seem to be like a self-fulfilling thing. In my experience, it was very much like it needs to line up with what the institution says. And so even though I think there is a way to live Christianity independently, there's also another way not to and because it's a communal religion, and most religions are, and the reason why I was thinking it just even outside of Christianity, period, for any person who's in any religion, there will often be mandates to say like,
Yeah.
this is the way that you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
and that is the will as prescribed by whatever that institution says. This is what it looks like to be a follower of whatever this thing is. And so it makes, to be in that sense, it makes it impossible to truly be free, because you are still within this frame. And that feels like a boundary that was a boundary I had to breach. This could get into a way into a theological conversation, but that's why I can totally see where you came from in that, and that's just why I went into the direction that I went.
But I like that though, because it almost feels like when folks like refer to like things as it relates to like the spirit realm, as it relates to the faith realm, so much of it is like you just have to have your own sort of approach and interpretation. If somebody else sees it, then great, but if they don't, then that just has to be okay too. In the same way that I might say like, oh, I believe in God. And someone says like, oh, well, there's no sort of like, proof of that. And it's like, well, you either are on this boat or you're not. Like, there's no explaining, like sometimes there's no like words or whatever. So I think it's interesting, just like knowing how you're talking about your own like evolution. Your relationship to this song is like, you either see it and see like the correlation or you don't. And I think that's so interesting because throughout this whole like album, I think Beyonce is really advocating for just like this sense of self, like whether or not other people are on board with it or not.
Yeah.
And I think that might be why including a song like Church Girl on here was so important, because there's certainly lots of people in the church who just don't feel like they can be true or authentic to who they want to be. So
that's that part. That's the part. And that's why her lyrics are so crucial. Let's get into the lyrics. I just loved it so much. I've been up, I've been down, feel like I move mountains, got friends that cry fountains. That's so crucial, because it's just like, I feel like part of just being a church girl is that deeply emotional experience of just being in church. And feeling, I would say particularly for women, feeling either shame or like a lot of responsibility for things, and also feeling that tension within the self about so many things. Like Christianity is largely patriarchal, and so women don't have, although women are the foundation of the church, and it could not thrive without it cannot thrive as an institution without women. But like, you have to be within this structure that makes you subordinate. And so even that tension, it's just like, that part. It's just like the crying that women have expressed in church settings, or as just a result of being a part of this or growing up in it. It is massive. It is wide as the ocean. And so I feel like her starting with that was important. And even her saying, feel like I move mountains, I think that's direct tied to like faith and the idea of like having a faith that can move mountains. So she's like coming out the gate, blending the experiences.
Yeah, I mean, not specifically to like those lyrics by themselves, but I certainly felt like that theme of responsibility throughout the whole song. And I think about just, within the church, particularly, how much responsibility is put on girls and women to like make sure that everybody is okay and like everybody's in line. And that's like quite a weight to bear. Like the way you conduct yourself as an individual has implications for everybody else, and you got to make sure that everybody else is in line. Like that's a lot.
It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. That's why starting out by saying like, feel like I move mountains, because it is a pressure to have to manage consistently, like all the time. It does not let up. And so then she goes into the second stanza. It's like, I'm warning everybody, as soon as I get in this party, I'm gonna let go of this body. I'm gonna love on me. Nobody can judge me but me. I was born free. I feel like that nobody can judge me but me. It's like, that is the like heart cry of so many church girls because of the judgment that we experience so much down to like, you know, the way we act, what we wear, how we talk, what we like, what we do, what we don't do. It's just like it can be, the church can be a constant source of judgment. Not saying that it always is, it's just that it can be a constant source. And so that I feel like it's like a battle cry. Like nobody can judge me but me. I was born free. Like to me, that's that contrast again that she's bringing.
Yeah, just this idea of like being born free that she says like several times throughout the song. I appreciated it so much because I think how the church has like evolved over time is certainly like a prison, a jail of sorts, particularly for women. Like to think that someone starts out free and then gets imprisoned by this institution whose like mission is supposed to be freedom is like wild to me.
Ding, ding, ding. That's the dichotomy that, again, it's just like, this is why it's such a masterpiece. It's like, it's the layers. It's just like, what you just said was so spot on. It's like, this was not intended to, like, this was not intended to be harmful for people, the church, you know, or was it? You could go into another thought of saying like Christianity was designed for this particular thing. But on the surface, it's supposed to be something that brings people to freedom, that shows people the way. It's something that makes life more meaningful and purposeful. And yet it has created a burden for so many people, especially women. So then the next line, the whole, like her refrain, drop it like I thought it, drop it like I thought it.
Yes.
Like you said, can you speak to the very specific instructions she gives us in that section?
You know, it's wild because I think of how like there's this like trope that there's like the church girl or even like the church boy, the pastor's kid and all that kind of stuff, that, you know, there's this idea that once they finally get that taste of freedom, again, this theme of freedom, that they're the wildest ones in the party and all that kind of stuff. And it's wild to, you know, just like think about this instructive tone that she's taken in terms of like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is the church girl's first time in the party. I don't know if you remember that episode of A Different World where whose cousins were they supposed to be? Maybe Ron's cousins. I can't remember whose cousins.
It was in Vogue,
right? But it was in Vogue, yeah. And they were the church girls. I don't think they were Ron's cousins. They were somebody else's cousins. Whitley's. I think they were Whitley's cousins. And so they came, and of course they had like, you know, like the little shawls and like the long skirts and everything. And Ron was trying to tell them, you gotta get into it. And they're like, oh no, you know. They had on like the glasses with the little. I kind of look like I have with the little thing and all that.
So long. Oh my God, I have to watch that episode later.
But you know, once they hit that stage and you know the spirit got into them, they were getting into it. But you know, it just kind of makes me think of like, you know, that image of like that first time in the party and somebody has to tell you, you gotta drop.
You gotta drop it like a thotty. I said drop it like a thotty. Twerk that shit, girl. Twerk it. Twerk that ass like you, she said, twerk that ass like you came out of the South, girl. Like, I gotta give you some clear instructions. It's like, go for it.
Not just drop it like anyone and drop it like a thotty.
Drop it like a thotty. Drop it. And I felt like that was so intentional, you know, like you're saying, it's like she's almost giving a narrative of an experience that it's like, am I seeing this? Like we're watching it happen, like a narration. And at the same time, it's like, it's very instructional. And I could also see it being just like, even if it's not a person who's done it for the first time, but it's just like every time you go, you have to have that reminder to just let it loose, because if the majority of the week you are thinking in this specific way about your body, about your clothes, about your actions, then it's just like you need an intense kind of, what's the word I'm going to use? You need an intense contrast is the word of the day. You need an intense contrast to be able to help you say, okay, right. Yes. And then I also think it's just reflective of what happens when things are under pressure. So when things are under pressure, when you finally release, it's like, it's combustion. It's like if you're under all of that pressure throughout the week or just mentally, then finally when it's time to get loose, it's going to be like one of them biscuit. This is like, and skirt. It's like,
I need to go back to the exact lyrics because I feel like she said that, like, I'm warning y'all that when I get into this party,
That's what it says. Yeah, I'm warning everybody. As soon as I
yes,
get in this party, I'm gonna let go of this body.
just like on that biscuit can, there's that label that
Yeah.
says, listen, be prepared for what's
Be
about to happen.
prepared. It's coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
All of this body is coming out. Them biscuits,
Yeah.
you just like, I ain't forgiving nobody. Like,
Yeah.
I'm putting it out there. And then, like you said, the next stanza, it goes into very specific instructions. You can be my daddy if you want to. I
Mm,
said, if you didn't hear me the first time, you can be my daddy if you want to. I
mhm,
feel like, of course, that's like sexual. I feel like that's about sexual freedom, sexual instructions. And then when
mhm,
she says you can get it tatted if you want to, I feel like
mhm,
that's a very, I mean, I thought it was a very Adventist thing. I think, of course, within other
mm,
denominations, it's the same thing. Like, you're not
mm,
supposed to get tattoos. Getting tattoos is bad. And then she said again, you can get it tatted if you want to. And I think
mhm.
it's like, look, you can be free. You can have
Yeah.
that sexual relationship that you want to and be
Mm,
very sexual by calling somebody your daddy. I don't think she's suggesting incestual relationships. Of
yeah.
course not, which I feel like somebody could like go there. But it's to say,
Mhm,
like, if you are in a kind of relationship where you have the freedom to be playful, the sexual freedom to be playful and to use nicknames or whatever, or to be
mhm,
submissive in a different context. So it's not
mhm,
submissive in the sense of like you're a subordinate person. It's submissive in the sense of like sexually, I'm choosing to like call you my daddy because
mhm.
I actually am empowered in that because I'm saying you can be my daddy if you want to. I'm telling you, you can be my
Mhm.
daddy, or of course, sugar daddy. So
Mhm.
it's that reference too.
Which he does get into later, talking about, like, the cash and all that kind of stuff.
It
But,
does, yeah.
the thing that stuck out to me about like that sequence
Mhm.
was, she started each line the same and finished each line the same, which is that you can if you want to. And I think that's such a, like, a
Ah,
powerful thing to like think about from the paradigm of like church and like churchiness, because the overall like message is like you can't do whatever. Like, you
right.
might want to, but you can't do those things.
Mhm.
And so this sort of like acknowledging of like you can do things, like it's gonna be all right,
Mhm.
like you don't have to carry this weight and carry this burden all
Mhm.
the time.
Mm. You don't have to carry. You can insert if you
Mhm,
want to.
mhm,
You can't. I feel like now that's a shirt that she could make. You can
mhm,
insert blank if you want to. That's the whole.
mhm, mhm.
And yeah, she does get into the like sugar daddy thing when she says, "I see a blank check." And then even, oh, you know what I liked right before that? Her line was, "I see them gray sweats," and I think that's important because it's the idea of like, as a church girl, you're not even supposed to look. You're supposed to
Mhm,
see the very appearance of evil, right?
mhm.
So it's like you can't look at what is right in front of you, but it's just like,
Right,
oh no, I see them gray sweats. And
right, right.
check. Like I see it, my eyes are opened.
Mhm,
Yeah, let's go. And then she gets into I feel like this is like the deliverance part of the song, the stanza where she's like, I'm finally on the other side. I finally found the urge to smile, swimming through oceans of tears. We cried again, talking about just, I think, the pain and the emotional
mm,
burden of being a church girl. And I like though that each time when she talks about tears, it's from a plural standpoint. So she says,
mm,
we cried. And then
mm,
also, like, and in the beginning, how she opens up the song, it's got friends that cry at fountains. So being a church girl, I feel like is a very community experience. And so it's like you're
mhm,
not alone in how you're experiencing this whole thing. And I think that's so important for her to mention, even though she didn't call
mhm,
the song Church Girls, she called
mhm,
it Church Girl, but it's just that experience of so many women going through it, because even if you didn't go through it yourself, you saw a friend who
oh, for
probably,
sure.
or who experienced all kinds of stuff at the hand of the church. We've
Mhm,
seen that. And I love that.
mhm. It's interesting that you bring up like that communal aspect, because I didn't pick up on that until she said like happy on her own with her
Mhm,
friends without a man. And that's the first time that I like heard community in the song.
mhm,
Even up until the point where you just mentioned it. But I think that line stood out to me because one of the things that's emphasized in church is like partnership. like romantic
Mhm.
partnership. And so, her specific pushing back on this in terms of like happiness and joy can come from other relationships other than like romantic partnership was something that I was like, yes, girl.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because I actually saw it in another way. And I'm so glad you said it that way because that's exactly true. And the way I was looking at it was, I don't know the stats, but Black church women are among the least wedded
Mhm,
or
mhm,
among the most divorced or the most single. And
mm,
I feel like I'm sure there's some stats like we can just find it.
mhm,
But
mhm,
there's so much pressure to get married, and
mhm,
yet there's just not the opportunity there a lot of
mhm,
times when you just look
mhm,
at statistics of Black men in the church and Black women in the church.
mhm,
Like you're not getting that, like it's way more women. It's like 4 to 1,
mhm,
And
mhm,
so women end up because they're also pressured to be, sexually prude or more sexually
mhm,
prude. Then it's just like you just holding on because you're not trying to like get in a relationship with one of these like random church dudes who is worth nothing, and then
mhm,
you're not trying to be bad by getting like a bad boy or something, and so you end up just being stuck like Chuck and being without a man and just trying to hold on and
mhm.
trying to go to whatever purity conference you can go to just try to focus on your own purpose, yet at the same
Have
time
you have you ever been to one? One of the purity conferences?
honey, I was in one of the ceremonies where I got a little key for my virginity.
What?
I can find the key right now.
We could talk about this. I didn't
Hanging
know
in the
this.
front of the church.
I've
Like,
never been
look
to
at me,
one.
I'm pure and I'm dressed in white.
I have not been to one. I know I have a cousin who has been to like several, and so like I know about them and like the details from her, but now I can find out more
Now,
details.
this what I went to was not, well, I did go. So Heather Lindsay, I did go to one of hers, but like only like
Okay,
part
I
of
know
something.
the
And then, but this other ceremony was just like it was a purity ceremony where we're
wow.
all like dedicating ourselves and stuff. And when I think about it now, it's like that is so harmful. But
Yeah.
it's like it creates, it's like these little girls,
Hmm.
these teenagers, these 20 somethings who commit themselves to Christ or to be pure or
Hmm.
whatever, you're gonna miss out on a lot. And so by the time not that you'll miss out on a lot in different ways. I'm not saying you need to go out there and be wild, and I'm just saying
Hmm.
it's about awareness in your own choice, right?
Hmm.
But like there is there's a different way that can be done besides it being kind of like this communal pressure to put on steel underwear and like lock away the key until this specific moment. And because of that, because those ideal conditions don't exist or they don't get created, again going back to the idea that you're supposed to be in the perfect will of God, because
Hmm.
everything needs to line up, the man needs to line up perfectly, you need to kind of like work your way into being this person who finally gets blessed enough to be able to have a spouse, because that's how it is a lot of times in the churches, as though like when you finally get married, it's because God has blessed you because you've done whatever specific work to finally receive that blessing. And so it's like you're pursuing the perfect will of God, and yet you're not in a relationship, you're still single, you're doing all the right things. And so what happens? You end up being without a man. And
Hmm.
that's the case for I think a lot of Black women who are in the church.
Yeah.
And that's so when I heard that, I was just like, whew, that's deep
Hmm.
to me, because you end up having to live a life without a partner.
Yeah.
You can see so many older women too who are
Hmm.
alone, and it might be lonely, and it might be because of the way that they have processed what it means to have a partner.
Right.
And without a man, you just with your friends and you without a man.
Hmm.
Not that you have to have one, but it's like it's this experience is predictable, something
Mm.
that is rare. The single older church Black woman, that's not a
Hmm.
rare experience.
Hmm.
That's a common experience.
Yeah, I didn't think of it from that perspective. I just thought of it in terms of like choice, in
Mhm.
terms of like I'm actively choosing to push against that specific expectation that ties the worth of a church girl to the fact that she's partnered. I didn't think of it as like a commentary on the state of you know relationships and the potential for relationships within the church. But I think both of those are
I think both of
accurate.
them are accurate. Yeah. And I think, and I mean, another episode for another day too, are what I think are predatory kind of behaviors on single church women. That's part of the
Mm,
reason why it's hard for me to even listen to some pastors, because everything's always directed to the women. Everything's the women's responsibility. I
yeah.
remember the church that I used to go to, it's Men's Day, but they talk about women and what women need to be doing for the men, and how like, and I think that's why TD Jakes got in trouble with his comments the other, like some weeks ago or months ago, because it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
it's your, I don't know, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's always women's responsibility and fault for
Mm-hmm.
whatever is going on with men a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, because there is so much, I don't think people want to call it desperation, but there's desperation and hopelessness when it comes to actually getting married for a lot of Christian women, that makes you really, really, really fertile prey. So it's
Yeah.
just like, if I mean, think about how many things you've seen about relationships, like Christian
Right.
relationships that are geared towards women, to say like, this is how you can get your husband. I remember
Mm-hmm.
this one group made a wife academy, and it's like, prepare yourself to be a wife, and it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like what is happening? Like this is literally crazy, but it's just like everything's about, like, well, if you do this, then God will bring you Boaz, and if you do this, if
Mm-hmm.
you sow a seed today, if you stay faithful, God will
Mm-hmm.
bless you with the partner of your dreams. If you stay faithful, committing yourself to this church, doing work for free, doing,
Mm-hmm.
overworking yourself, over exhausting yourself. This is your pathway to salvation. When
You,
Black women are prey in the church, I think.
I don't remember if we like talked about this, but I remember like within that first year of me being married, I had a conversation with like a couple close like friends,
Mhm.
being like, I am extremely angry at like any sort of like church-based programming, any sort of like church-based conversation, meaning like people saying things like, oh, we'll pray for you, like, you're about to get married, here's some, godly advice and things like that. I remember being genuinely angry because I remember realizing that all those things that y'all have said over the course of however many months or years were not applicable.
Mm.
Like all of that stuff that y'all were talking about marriage and what wife should do and what wife shouldn't do and all that stuff. I was like, this is not helpful. Like I could put together some kind of programming to like help people think about the
Like,
actual challenges that people face and whatnot.
what's one thing that you feel like was a refrain that you feel like is absolutely wrong, or at least mostly wrong in most situations, or at least completely wrong in your situation? Any
I
version.
think I think I'm trying to remember like what exactly it was that like set that off. I think what I what I realized at a certain point in um in my marriage, like very early on, was that I had been told that I needed to basically like be the support to my husband, right?
Helpmate.
Like that was like the church kind of advice. And I think there's nothing wrong with like being supportive to like the person who you're married to or anything like that. But I think that that type of support that I was trying to like embody just based on this advice that I've gotten from women who've been married for a long time and all that kind of stuff, um, was to like my own detriment.
Mm.
Like I, in the same way that like this I think is a more like common like visual example of like seeing mothers in like a grocery store with like kids who are just like crying or kind of wilding out or whatever. And that mom, you could see it in her face and her body. It was just like, I am tired. I need a break. And I feel like the advice and like the direction that I was given over the course of all that time was like, you don't get that as a wife. Like, you are there to support, like, be there for your husband. It doesn't matter what you have going on as far as like work or whatever else you have going on. So I think like initial, like my first, like, all right, I'm married now. Like what I need to do is like, I need to continue doing everything that I'm already doing, but then I need to take on this additional role. So if I thought of like my plate of being like 100% full,
Mm-hmm.
then at that point, my plate was like 125% full or whatever it was, right? So I was just constantly feeling like I was doing too much, like there was no balance. And what would have been more helpful was like, you can do those things, but you also need to adjust in these other ways. And if you don't want to adjust in these other ways, like this is like a different sort of like model for what your marriage can look like. Like I just needed to understand that there, like the option of like working myself to the grave was not like, I realized at a certain point that that was like the model I was given.
That's the model. That's the will. That's what I'm talking about. It's this will. It's this version that we're. It's the script. It's
Mhm.
the program. It's the it's the course. It's all the
Mhm.
things that we're supposed to fit within. And if you don't, and if you fit it, if you try to stick on that thing, it will tear you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
That's all I can say on that one.
So, but you're right. Like that's a whole nother that's a whole nother conversation that I
I
think
mean,
we should definitely bring
I
to the
feel like that's why I feel like this song is talking about so many things. Oh my God. Like just the commentary of women in the church at
Mhm.
all ages.
Mhm.
I'm it just brings up so much because it's like, what does it mean to be a married woman and be free? Right. Is freedom a factor?
There's no paradigm for that,
Mm-mm.
right? Like in terms of like when you go into these like little workshops, particularly the ones where they're like, this is for women, you know, for young women. Come on through. This is not like the multi-gender space. This is specific sort of guidance. There's no paradigm for that. There's no paradigm to suggest that like I can have some measure of like freedom, support, balance that doesn't revolve around another entity.
Right.
And there's certainly like it's not like I've been married for like 50 years, but
Mhm.
just a few years in, I'm like, there's certainly room to figure out like the balance between those things. Like I don't have to give 125% to the detriment of myself. Like there are ways that I can give 100% collectively. Um, or there might be moments that I can give like 75% because that's what I have to give at that moment.
And that's
Like
okay.
there are ways, like there are formulas to get there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's okay. You get to decide how you're gonna live your life. And that's where I feel like this is a beckoning for freedom, for people to be able to decide for themselves what their will is for their lives so that they can
Mhm.
be in the center of their own of their own will, right?
Mhm.
And just that's why the last line just works for me. And I know we're
Mm.
like this was supposed to be a mini so, but we got to talking,
It's
y'all.
it's a maxi sold.
It's
Is
a
that a
maxi
thing? Because
but her just saying, I ain't trying to hurt nobody, just trying to bring the life up in your body like
that's
that.
it.
And we won't even talk about the politics of the body and the
Mm,
female body and the Black woman's body. Like we won't even talk
mm,
about that. And even though she's not being specific to saying that this is for Black church girls, I
mhm.
feel very much like her as a Black woman and her
It's
using
clear.
um
Mhm.
the Clark sisters sample
Mhm.
is like, even though I think it's applicable to, I think it could be applicable to women from all types of religions and of all
Mhm.
races and ethnicities. I feel very much attracted to this because it
Mhm.
feels like she's talking directly to Black women, Black church
Mhm.
girls. And so like, so if you were even to talk about the Black female body and the politics of that inside of the church, whole nother conversation. So she's just
Mhm.
talking. That's why I just feel like this is a masterpiece, and I feel like I got 2 or 3 more episodes in me.
Well, let's pick it up when we unpack song number 2.
Yes. So y'all, we're gonna come back and talk about cozy. Cozy, which I feel like has the same kind of vibe of like, we trying to get free. I'm good in my
Yeah.
body. What?
Yes, yes. Speaking of body politics, like that's
Mm.
a good one to like pick that part up back on.
Oh, can't wait. All right, y'all. I hope that you all enjoyed our quick commentary, semi not quick commentary about
It
church.
wasn't quick.
Would love to hear your thoughts about it. Don't be up in the comments talking crazy because it's not going to affect either of us. Just don't waste
So
your
I
time
mean,
and your breath.
be crazy if you want to.
Well, you're open to that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even care. Like, if you,
I'm unbothered.
you're unbothered. I'm
Yeah.
bothered. Okay. Like, don't even start the conversation because I could like, I don't. That's another thing too.
Mhm.
I'm free to just be like, oh, okay, all right, that's not what we were saying, but but let me not even
Mhm.
anticipate that. I'm anticipating some,
Yeah.
some harmony, all of that. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. All right, that's been another episode of the Street Academy podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in them streets. All hearts and minds clear.
I'm good.
Period. Good. Bye, everybody. See you next time. Oh, wait.
Got their feet upon the neck of the haters, the game and the devil like came